Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt-Maldonado.
And I'm Dr. Rob Maldonado.
And today we are continuing our series on relationships, everyone's favorite topic. And today's topic is disempowering work relationships, where I think we all can relate in some way.
Yeah, most of us.
Like, I have to work with this guy.
Most of us have been there or will be there at some point, or maybe are currently in those kind of situations. So we're going to talk a little bit about what disempowerment is, how it plays out in the work relationships, and then what you can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so disempowering, how would you define it, Rob?
Well, let's say,
I guess it's not empowering.
Yeah, how do we fall into that trap of feeling disempowered and giving our power away?
Mm-hmm.
Because from our perspective, we see ourselves as the ones that give our power away.
Mm-hmm.
No one is holding a gun to our head and saying, you have no personal power.
Yeah,
it's our own mind or our misunderstanding, our conditioning, our past patterns, whatever it is us who give our power away.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people say they're taking away my power, this person's taking away my power, my boss is very disempowering. Yeah. And so we want to take responsibility. Yeah. And so projecting the power onto our bosses and our clients, if we have our own business, our team, we are disempowering ourselves. And so how do we reclaim that power?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the basics, right? Mm-hmm. And from our perspective, the mind is the cause of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're thinking about relationships, romantic relationships, work relationships, success, etc., the mind is the cause of those things. The external circumstances simply are reflecting that mindset. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to this idea of a conscious universe. Recently there's been some articles like on Scientific American and some of the big scientific journals announcing, scientists are finally kind of coming around to this idea that, we're living in a conscious universe. Everything seems to be alive. And we really don't need validation from science because science is a great tool and we support that. But we've known this for millennia, basically, for ages and ages.
For some people.
And there's a difference. I have this East-West discussion with a lot of our clients and our students that from a scientific perspective, certainly people can, or scientists can, figure out this idea that's been around for a long time that, yes, it is a conscious universe that we're living in, but there's a difference because it won't be a direct experience. It will be a formula, an idea, another idea to kind of add to your understanding of the universe, but we want a direct experience of that, a direct realization. And that goes back to this idea of how do we give our power away? Because it plays directly into this idea that how are you seeing the external world? Are you seeing it as independent and separate from your mind?
Like that boss out there and
yes,
is bad, so I need to change jobs.
That's right, because that is a material interpretation of the universe, that we are separated by matter, and that I am inside my head and everything else is happening externally to me. That's materialistic understanding, and that's not how it works. That's not the way the universe works. The universe is more like an idea, like a conscious idea, like a dream.
That's a great way to start this out, because I think that's really the root of disempowerment, is projecting your power to the world, saying, this thing happened to me, this person did this to me, and I'm a victim. I'm in this terrible predicament that I'm trapped in. And it's that this empowerment, to me, it's like almost like you feel trapped. You feel that you don't have any personal power to make a change in your life.
Absolutely.
I hate my job, I hate my boss, but I can't leave because I need the money, and you're kind of trapped. I keep getting these same kind of relationships. These dynamics keep playing out. So how does it play out? For me, it's when I was in the corporate world. I mean, we're going to talk about two scenarios. So there's work relationships. If you're in the corporate world and you're working with teams and you're working with bosses and colleagues, and then there's also, if you're an entrepreneur, it's the same, there's a similar dynamic, but you're working with clients, or you're a consultant and you have clients that you're working with, or patients, and you're trying to, deal with the conflicts that show up in those situations. Because all of us, whether we're an entrepreneur or work for someone else, people are always going to cause conflicts in our life, and so or there's going to be conflicts with those relationships. And where do they come from? And basically, they're a reflective of our early life experience. So they play out. So I see my bosses were always like my father, the disapproving, not appreciative, never showing how much they like you, critical father. And so I would go into these jobs, and I'd always have to change jobs all the time, thinking, I really don't like this boss. It's like the same situation would show up in the new job, and it was always this kind of needing to prove myself. So when you find yourself repeating patterns, you have to start to think, well, if you're the central point, then there's something to look at here. So that would be one way it plays out, is that you feel that it's a familiar pattern, but you don't know, you feel stuck in it.
Yeah, and that sets us up for disempowerment, because let's just assume, if you're playing along with us at home, imagine that your early experiences in your family with your parents, you internalize that. That becomes your filter, your lens through which you see the world. Mm-hmm. Then you go out into the world and you project that onto the screen of the world.
So you hand out the scripts based on the scripts you created when you were in that younger time.
That's right. And so you're not really seeing the current situation. What you're experiencing is your projection, your past conditioning onto the present moment.
Mm. And I think not only family, but I think also in socially, because we really work with our peers. So not only the family relationships, the dynamic of the parents play out, or the sibling rivalry, but also how did you fit into growing up in school, and were you accepted? Were you part of the cool crowd? Were you the nerdy one that it was always left out? I'm not saying, why are you looking at me? But this kind of feeling like you want to be a part of something. And, so all those patterns from growing up, we tend to reflect back. All those relationships, the social dynamics that we learn to be in our persona, our identity.
So projection, then, what it does is we give away our power right there. Because what we're saying through projection, through believing in the process of projection, that the external circumstances have power over me. In other words, I'm saying only when things work out in a certain way will I be happy. Only when the boss responds to me in a certain way will I be,
if I get a good review,
happy in my work.
If I get acknowledged by my colleagues, I get that promotion.
That's right. Yes, all of those things, projection and buying into it, in other words, misinterpreting what we're experiencing, sets us up for that disempowering feeling, because now we're waiting for the external circumstances to dictate to us how we feel.
So, for example, in the dynamic of the parent, say you had a very critical parent, it would tend to, when we get into in a corporate setting, we are projecting that authority that our parent had onto our boss or any authority figure. Yeah. It's like they just play the role, and you're not even seeing that person for who they are, but you're almost assuming or even interpreting everything they say the same way you interpreted it. So it's more of an interpretation than them actually because sometimes I remember thinking my boss didn't like me, and then they were like, "What do you? We love you. You're doing a great job." But it's like in my mind, it was that projection of that negative parent.
And for entrepreneurs, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the boss, but the business then becomes that reflection.
Well, the clients become your authority because they're the ones who are paying you. We're in a corporate world, and especially if you come from the corporate world, you're used to the authority being in charge of your income. And if you're a coach or a consultant or a lawyer or any kind of service type of situation where you're getting money from clients directly, like small business, you are actually making them the authority unconsciously. Like even though you are the teacher, or you feel like the guru, you can unconsciously give them your power. And I've seen this a lot with especially coaches. Since we train coaches, I see this a lot with keeping boundaries with their clients, because they feel like if I ask for, set some boundaries, my client's going to leave me and they're not going to pay me, or they're going to get mad at me, and I'm going to, so they fall into that same trap of obedience. And that's disempowering. That's
right.
And even in the corporate world, it's the boss not asking for a raise, not asking for anything. One of my very first memories was I went to my boss and I just said, "Oh, I'm going to end up quitting. I'm going to leave New York City and I'm going to move." And she was like, "I didn't know you were unhappy." And I said, "Well, I really wanted to get promoted. I can't believe you haven't promoted me yet." She goes, "Why didn't you ask me?" And it was just like this. My mind was creating this. She didn't appreciate me or didn't think I was capable, but it was just a projection, and like having a conversation. So it's like getting that power back. It's like asking for what you want, not being afraid of being rejected. Those things that were conditioned early in life. Because when we were kids, how many times did our parents tell us no? A lot. Can I get this new super powered motorcycle? No, you can. And that kind of obedience that we learn, which is good when we're kids. We need to have some structure, but then we end up projecting that.
So how does it play out in the work situation? So we've established that there is this process of projection. It is part of the ego's defense mechanisms, but it's also part of just let's say the way we experience the world. It's, in other words, it's not pathological to project. It's simply that we get to a certain point where we want to understand how the mind is working, because otherwise we're going through our life misunderstanding what we're experiencing. We're thinking it's all coming from the external, and the external has this power over me, and I have no power.
Like we get lost in the world.
Yes. And so now, as we see that it plays out in the work that we're doing, in the relationship with the boss, in the relationship with colleagues, in the relationship with the
clients.
Business and clients, like you say, how do we start to understand it? In other words, how to benefit from what we're experiencing?
Well, I think a lot of us have had two parents, so there's always the good cop and the bad cop, and typical, like the one you liked and the one you didn't, the one that gave you a hard time. And so we see them show up in a lot of different ways. And I say, there's the authority figure, which the parent is. There's two ways that authority figure can act, and they can act either as the critic or the oppressor, or they can act as the savior in your mind. And so you can act that if you give that authority to your boss, they're either the savior or the critic, or the client too. Oh, this client is paying me, so now they're my savior. They're coming to save me, and you're giving them that authority. So that's how it really plays out, is this idea that you put them up on a pedestal, right, and you're seeing them as you're disempowered because and then how you related to your parents and that dynamic and authority figures early on is how you're going to play out by default, unless you become conscious.
Yeah. I know personally, I had what Jung would call a mother complex. Now, again, this is a natural process for all of us, because we all internalize our parents and then kind of experience those things in work settings, here's an opportunity for us to learn from it, right? Because what we're doing through the projection is we're seeing it playing out externally to us. Somebody is actually playing the role that is internalized in you.
It's not like a random event. It's like there's a reason why this person's in your life.
That's right. So I had a very supporting and loving, nurturing mother.
She was awesome.
So to me, always the shadow of that, meaning the suffocating, controlling, critical mother, didn't really exist for me. But it's in the shadow.
Until you met me. Just kidding.
Meaning it's going to come up for me so that I can face it.
Okay.
So that I can face the opposite. So I can integrate it, as Jung would say.
Instead of thinking that everyone needs to be that one way.
That's
and that
right.
if, like hiding.
Yes, anything that you're attached to and that you move towards consciously, you're creating the opposite, right?
Because you can be attached to the loving, nurturing mother,
absolutely.
right? That attachment, that could be, it's, a lot of people think, well, that should be how it is, but it's like, then that actually can create an attachment.
Well, yes, because what you're doing then is you're cultivating in a conscious way your relationship to moving towards a work situation that is nurturing, supportive, loving.
You become dependent on it.
And whenever you're attached to that, consciously you're creating its opposite, that you're moving away from the challenging, critical, kind of pressure-filled situation. So you end up creating it, basically. In other words, the mind is going to create that for you so that you can integrate it. But if we misunderstand the work situation, we think, I keep falling into these, the opposite kind of job situations that I want to create for myself. Because we think I'm doing it wrong, but it's actually that the mind is giving you an opportunity to face it.
Integrate it, because you're not really in balance if you are attached to only feeling loved and adored by people.
That's right.
That's really, I mean, it sounds like, oh, that's how you surround yourself with people that love and adore you, but then if you're attached to it, then it actually becomes a problem.
That's right. So the integration for me happened precisely in a situation where I had a woman, a supervisor, who was that shadowy mother, right?
The opposite of your mother.
Exactly. The opposite of everything I was looking for. And I had to face it. And in staying with it and facing that challenge and understanding it as, oh, this is part of my growth process. I see what it is. You get to integrate it, meaning you're not running away from it anymore. You're able to deal with it in a conscious way and use it to your advantage. It gives you like a more holistic perspective on work and your career, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that in a like a coach situation or service, like if you're again doing work and you have clients that pay you and you're in your own business, a lot of times what you're working through is a lot of times coaches want to be appreciated, they want to be loved, they want to be the clients who tell them how great their results are. They want to keep continuing to work with them. There's that attachment. And the thing is, if you depend on that, you're going to get the opposite. The one client that says, I'm not really getting any results and it always complains, it's a great way to see, oh, that's the shadow. Because I'm so attached to being one thing, this is an opportunity. Instead of, let's get rid of that person, they're too much of a problem, I'm only going to be with people that love and adore me. It's not, when you're attached to it, it's not about respect. Like, of course, there's opportunities for boundaries and disrespect. But if you're too attached to always only hearing the good side from clients and only hearing the praise, then you're going to end up limiting yourself, but also it's going to be very stressful. And again, another thing too, I think, is you have to think about in the work and the client situation is that your clients and your team and the people that work under you are going to be projecting their parent authority onto you at the same time. And what happens is that if you're not conscious, both people are projecting, and you're not really seeing the other person. You're having a relationship with them in your mind. They're having a relationship with you in their mind, and nothing really gets accomplished. And that this is, I think, why people get divorced, why people leave jobs, and there's all this misunderstanding because no one's really aware of what's happening, truly.
Yeah. So people often ask at this point, then does that mean I should always stay in the situation that I'm in, even though I'm struggling or having a hard time?
I say, get away from them now. I say that until you face the shadow, you're not clear on what is actually happening. And I've seen so many of my clients who've had difficult relationship with bosses, and I see that it's very, very common that once they worked on their shadow, the relationship with their boss starts to improve because they change their piece of the puzzles, and so everything starts to shift. Because a lot of times they're both really dealing with the same shadow sometimes. And so if two people are insecure, they're going to project that other thing on the other person, and then you're kind of entangled, like that shadow entanglement. And a client and coach can have that, any kind of service and a client can have that dynamic. And if there's that struggle, it's like they're both projecting. So the best thing you can do is work on your own projection first, and then you could decide, you know what? This isn't what I want, and you're making a clear decision, not from a reaction from the past or a projection. You're actually seeing clearly what the situation is. And, we always say that you should always respect yourself, and it's really good to keep boundaries, but you also have to just check in and see, what am I projecting in this situation?
Yeah, it's always an opportunity when triggers like that or difficult situations arise for us, if we stay with it at least long enough to get to the point where you're saying, I'm seeing things clearly now. I can see that it's been my own projection, and I can see why I've created these situations for myself. Then you can decide whether you stay or go. Yeah.
And I know for me, boundaries were a big deal. And I think a lot of women, especially, whether it's the boss or whether it's you have your own business, is because we just want to be good people. We want people to like us. And that setting boundaries puts us in that parental role. And we're now being the mother or the father saying, no, these are the rules. And we have first of all, resistance to take on that role.
Right.
And then second, we're afraid of the response from the other person, that we won't be loved and adored. And so you have to think about, in this dynamic of, what is your relationship with authority? What is your relationship with authority, and what do you project into the authority figures around you? And then that may be in your shadow. Maybe you are the follower and never had that authority. You have to kind of integrate that part into your life. And it is tough sometimes when you are used to being the pleaser and smoothing things over, and then when you learn to set boundaries, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be friction. People aren't always going to be happy, and you have to be strong enough to not fall back into the old pattern of, okay, it's fine, and back up. So I know for me that was like a big deal for me, is that people not asking for more than they got out of the program, or stretching things, and then kind of being willing to say, no, this isn't what we need, and being willing to be that disciplinarian in a way that says, this is my boundary. And it's very empowering, because that makes other people understand where they stand, and then they know what's going on, versus this kind of gray area of, I don't know how to be with you. It's like, these are the rules, these are the things.
And it's such a subtle thing, because we know when a person is empowered and feels empowered, and that they're comfortable in their own skin, they know what they want. You don't have that sense of anxiousness or nervousness around them, because let's say you know what to expect from them. Even if you don't agree with them, you respect them because they know who they are and what they want. And so that energy is what empowerment gives you. The ability to show up for your work life as somebody who knows who they are and what they, what they're creating in their life.
I see this too in the colleagues level, where you see someone who's always like talking up in the boardroom or the meetings and taking credit for everything and asking for things, and even I've seen people say, I'm working really hard, and Becky over here, she takes all the day time off, and she's shows up late all the time, and she leaves early, and she's always on the phone, personal calls, and here I am working, and it's not fair. They're showing you your shadow about you're so attached to being the hard worker, and that kind of like you're afraid to get away with that. And so how does that affect you? So people that trigger you at work, it's really amazing how much they can teach you.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen that happen too. We have a lot of our clients are hardworking, successful women, and they're always triggered by the slackers at the office, or people that work for them that are slackers. And so you kind of have to look at, this is all part of your own psyche and the conditioning and those roles that you played and that were played around you, and it's just recreating itself over and over again.
Yeah, so I wanted to also ask you about this, because this often comes up when I'm coaching our students and clients, that a lot of us were raised with this idea of the path of least resistance,
mm-hmm.
right? We think that, if things are going smoothly for me and I'm comfortable in my situation, that's what I'm meant to be doing,
mm-hmm.
and that's where I should stay. And is that a good approach to our work?
Well, I always say the path of least resistance is the path of least existence. And it's because the conflict is actually what helps us grow. I mean, conflict creates change. If you ever see any type of movie, any drama, if you study screenwriting, you know that the character's one way in the beginning, and a conflict had to come in for them, and that conflict basically changed them, and then that led to their evolution. If we didn't have conflict, we wouldn't be pressured to grow. And so when we have a conflict with a colleague, a boss, a client, we have to say, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to grow. And I find that for me, I mean, this has been really hard early in my career, being the pleaser, and people when I was a hypnotherapist, people would show up and they're like, I can't pay you today, but can I pay you next week? And I was like, okay. And, I was just so afraid to ask for money or to set those boundaries because I was afraid they wouldn't like me. And then I found that wasn't helping me at all, like the path of that least conflict. I was avoiding conflict. It kind of created me not making enough money and not being successful. And then when I did start asking for more money, raising my rates, the conflict started, and the guilt and the people saying, you're too expensive, and or setting boundaries with people, and it started that conflict. But it was a sign that I was growing. It was a sign that I wasn't willing to just buffer myself into my old behavior. I was ready to step out. And sometimes when we're not consciously moving towards something, but when we're ready to move to the next level, a conflict will arise. Mm-hmm. And for me, my last year in my corporate job, the last few months, I was starting to get really comfortable. I was like, I don't need to find my purpose. I could just stay here. It's kind of comfortable. And then all of a sudden they had a big rearrangement of the company. They changed my job, and all this stuff started happening that stirred up. And it was the conflict that led me to actually leave finally and break free. But at the time, it was like, wait a minute, I'm in my comfortable little position here, and now you turn things around. And so when we have those kind of upheavals in life, we lose a job, or we have lose a big client, or something happens, we say, this is something that's is helping me grow to the next level. And we may not even know what it is yet, but you trust that that's what's happening. So we don't want to be afraid of tragedies, obstacles, and conflicts.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we don't step outside that comfort zone, everything is smooth and everything is peaceful, then we have to wait for those crises to arise in order to grow. But if we're willing to step outside and always push the boundary, we're in a way doing it in a conscious way, right? We're consciously directing our own evolution through not, instead of waiting for crises, we're saying, if I step outside my comfort zone and just try to do something more than I've been comfortable doing, something's going to come up, but I'm going to be consciously eliciting it in a sense.
Instead of me, it was like with everything
waiting for the
to get laid off to finally say, okay, I got to do this. I could have consciously created that, but we all. Our soul is always looking to grow and to have a more expression of itself in our life, and so it's always going to try that dissatisfaction that we feel with life is really our soul going, it's too tight in here. I want to stretch. I want to grow, and so the people around us are really showing us that the path to growth. So when we think about how do we work with it. How do we do? So we have a conflict. What do we do? I always think that when someone's triggering us, we're not seeing the situation clearly. When we have an emotional reaction to something and we're triggered, we're really just back in our pattern. Because when we're triggered in that kind of, I'm talking about intense trigger. I'm not like, that person's annoying. It's that intense trigger. It means that you're not seeing things the way they are. And so when you are, the first step is when you're really triggered about something, just acknowledge that, you know what, I don't know, I'm not seeing this completely clearly right now. I'm responding from the past and I'm not really seeing things clearly, but you invite it in. And so a question a lot of people ask is, well, when I'm in a trigger and I'm in a situation and that person is right there, how do I be zen about it? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. You have to wait till later on, remove yourself from the situation to really process what happened.
Yeah, and a big part of it is understanding what is it that I'm experiencing when I'm triggered or when I'm facing these difficult situations at work. Really what you're experiencing is the conditioned mind. Now, the way to work with it is to see the nature of that mind. In other words, we're asking, am I that mind? Or am I observing the mind?
That's a good way to put it. I'm aware that I'm having this trigger right now, and so that question of, I know I'm not seeing things clearly. There's this kind of Jung would say, something has come alive in me that needs my attention, and so to have that curiosity about it versus this is not good and I have to get away from that person and strategize about how to get even with that person, and
that's right.
You get caught up in it and you're not really how do I get even and how do I get back? And you see people argue on Facebook all the time and just oh my God, they're so caught up in each other's shadow that you just have to relax and take a step back.
Yeah, because the reason and the reason we want to work with triggers is because when we're caught in their they hook us into that pattern. We don't have a choice.
It's like it pulls us down, dragging us into the old pattern again.
We're caught up in the drama. Chain. We're caught up in really recreating our past experiences. Those patterns, that internalized family system that we're bringing into work now is playing out, and it's got us hooked in. So the way we start to free ourselves without trying to fix or judge or think that we're doing something wrong
or they're doing something wrong.
Exactly, simply buying into the projection, is we start to realize thoughts are not who we are. We are the witness of the thoughts. We are the witness of the emotions.
And we're not the emotions either.
We're not
an angry person.
Yeah.
We're not a fearful person. It's the body's having an experience of that. But that's not who I am.
That's it. And that begins in that process of freeing ourselves from that conditioning without having to fix it or push it away or change the boundaries of it. And of course, we're going to do all those things. We're going to, let's say, deal with the actual situations of the relationship with a boss or with colleagues. But the internal work is what really makes the shift and liberates our mind from that conditioned pattern.
What about jealousy in work? I know a lot of people, whether you're in the entrepreneur and you're in those groups, and some people are the shining stars and the other people are jealous of that shining star. We're in the work, the same thing. We get jealous of our colleagues who get the promotion and we don't. It's that sibling rivalry almost, or that kind of jealousy that happens in junior high where or in grade school, like, it's not fair, that kind of, remember when we were kids, I don't know if you remember in my household, when we got soda, it was a special deal. We normally didn't have soda in our house. And my mother would pour it and we'd all like hold our glasses to make sure we all got the same amount. Everything had to be the same. And that equity of siblings. And I think that we feel that when we feel that inequity, that triggers that kind of beginning conditioning of it's not fair. And that fairness, I don't know, how old do you think kids learn fairness? Really young, right?
Yeah, I mean, all those patterns, again, they're simply projections. And in work relationships, in all kinds of relationships, actually, you have what's called transference and countertransference. It sounds very clinical, but it's a natural process in all relationships that we're reacting to the other person from our old conditioned patterns instead of really seeing who is this person and what is my relationship with them. We're seeing our projections essentially. That is transference. And countertransference is simply whoever is in the authority role. If you're the coach, you're in the authority position. The countertransference would be, what is this client pulling from me? What am I projecting onto them?
Or the boss saying, what are my team members pulling from me? What are they?
Yes.
And then we're responding to their, it's almost like that entanglement. We're responding from our issue, from our past to their past, and you're not really seeing each other in the present.
That's right. And so it is the process of first understanding what is the nature of the mind, how are we experiencing these things we call our life in work and relationships, and then being able to work with those things. In other words, it's not about pushing them away or solving them, fixing them, but through understanding the nature of them, then we're able to respond in a creative way.
And one of the questions I always say is, why am I giving this person so much of my power? Why am I giving my boss so much of my power? Why am I giving this client so much of my power? Why am I giving my colleague or my friend who's, doing what I'm doing and seeing her as competition? Why am I giving that person so much power? And it's because we aren't aware of our own. Like it's about reclaiming it and just asking yourself that question. Because when they talk about forgiveness, that idea that you should forgive the other person because the more you hate them, the more they have power over you, which is in essence true. You're drinking your own poison by, thinking that person did me wrong. And the more we can, look at our parents, that they didn't do anything wrong, not that they could have done better, but they tried their best. The people around us, even our bosses. I had a lot of, when I first started doing this work, I had a lot of, self-development. I was thinking I had a lot of resentment for my past bosses and how mean they are. And now it's kind of gone. It's like, oh yeah, they were kind of there because they were showing me my mind. They weren't doing anything to me as much as I was playing the role that kind of fit that pattern. And so it's just, you'll always surround yourself with people that reflect how conscious you are. And the more conscious you become, the more beautiful relationships you have. And it's really just a reflection of your relationship with yourself. Do you identify as this little ego that's trying to survive, or do you identify with the beautiful, unlimited soul that you are? And when you come to any relationship that way, it's beautiful because you empower the other person. You don't see them as a threat. You don't give them your power. And then they could be who they need to be. You can keep boundaries with them, but you're not caught up in it, like triggered and afraid to say anything. You get to just fully express who you are. It is kind of the least resistance part. It's not a least resistance, but it's you're kind of rising above the conflict, and you're seeing it from both sides, and you're able to, it's like a mediator basically with conflicts.
Yeah, but definitely powerful ways to do our personal development when we approach work this way, because then work is, for most of us, is something we do every day or most of the week. So it gives us that opportunity to practice continuously, to always be in it. And just like romantic relationships, it forces us to confront the internal challenges for us.
So I love what you said too in the beginning about that we also have to look at the relationship with ourselves, like our business. If you're in your own business or your career, it's like really you're, through all these people that are coming in, you're working on your relationship with yourself. And are you forgiving to yourself? Are you loving to yourself? Are you tolerant with yourself? Are you, do you respect yourself? All those things will show up in the world and challenge you, and especially the things that you're not aware of, that you're pushing away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the key is to look at your patterns in your early life family. What role did you play? Were you the victim? Were you the star child? You know, what role did you play? Which parent did you put up on the pedestal, and which one did you resent? And then you're going to look at your life and look at the bosses you've had, look at the relationships you've had at work, and you're going to see that pattern. Oh, I could see my mother in that woman or my dad in that man. And not necessarily also by sex, because a lot of my bosses were women, but I still projected my father because they were the authority. And my father, who is the authority in your household, they'll play out the authority in your business.
That's a good point.
And then work with the conflicts. And then I think we all forget when we do personal development work, we're always trying to just get out of the uncomfortableness and the things that are happening to us. But don't forget to create a vision of what you want to create versus I'm just kind of batting away. Things are coming at me. Let me consciously set an intention for what do I want to create in my business? What do I want to create in my career? What kind of team do I want to have? What kind of boss do I want to work for? What kind of clients do I want to have? And when you have to create that in your mind, and then work with the things that show up that aren't in alignment with that, and that's all the stuff that you need to work on in here. Yeah. Instead of, I got to avoid these kind of people or that type of person, I need to kind of really clear it up within myself. And then the outside just takes care of itself. It's just miraculous how things happen. Even dynamics with people, the same person will change.
Yeah, because if we go back to the idea of disempowerment, meaning that we're projecting and believing in the projection, in empowerment, we're taking back the projection. Mm-hmm. We're owning it. We're saying, I take responsibility for the way my life plays out.
And the way I'm responding to this person, this conflict, right?
That's right. And not projecting that blame onto others. Mm-hmm. In other words, Jung says that this is difficult for us because it requires great moral courage on our part to accept full responsibility for our life. In other words, there's no one to blame. You don't want to blame your parents. You don't want to blame your bosses. You don't want to blame the economy. You want to say, I take full responsibility for what I experience in work, in fulfilling my purpose, in my relationship with my colleagues, my clients. So
are you attached to having adoring people around you?
Of course, but I recognize it as that. Right?
It's not like you want to push that away.
Yeah, as long as you're aware of what you're experiencing, you're free from it. Right? You're able to include it in the way you're making your decisions about your work.
Yeah, it's all about not making anything wrong, but making the unconscious conscious, so then you can make a choice as to how you want to respond to something versus just responding out of the pattern unconsciously. So what a great little class today. Next week, I know what we're going to talk about because I did my research. We're going to talk about, answer the question, hopefully, do soulmates exist? And talk about romantic relationships. We're going to end it with a bang. So see us next Friday for our final installment of this relationship series. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. We take snippets of and bonus teachings we post here all the time. Go to iTunes and subscribe to us, Soul Sessions with Creative Mind, and also join our Facebook group, Jungian Life Coaching with Creative Mind University, where we are in there with our coaches and interacting. So if you want to interact with us in between shows, join us in that Facebook group. We'd love to say hello and get to know you. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching.
Take care.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.